Hello and welcome to Edinburgh Business Stories. EBS is hosted by myself, Alex Richards of Umore, a video production studio based in Edinburgh and Bristol, and Alan Smith of Action Coach, providing business coaching throughout Edinburgh and the Lothians. If you aren't already, remember to subscribe, and I hope you enjoy this upcoming episode of Edinburgh Business Stories. Peter, great to have you on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So give us just a brief snapshot of right now of who you are and what your current business is and does.
Thanks. So I'm Peter Proud. I'm the founder of a company called Forrit. We started it as a joint venture with WPP in 2014. We've got over 60 people in Edinburgh. We're just pivoting just now from being a product development company to a sales and marketing company because we've spent the last 10, 11 years building a enterprise software business.
Amazing. So let's go back to the beginning. It's always a good place to start. Like, how did you get into this? What's kind of your career into Forrit?
Yeah, it was interesting. I actually did an apprenticeship in software in 1985 with Marconi. So in the early days of software, I had the exam results to go to university, but kind of not the social economic background in those days to get to uni. We couldn't really afford it. So I went down the kind of apprenticeship route. And so, I was lucky enough to there were 7 of us actually got an apprenticeship in Marconi. And it's interesting when you look back, kind of looking forward, you've got to look back, all 7 of us that did that apprenticeship have done phenomenally well, phenomenally well. Multiple companies started because of it, all from that apprenticeship. So yeah, I did an apprenticeship, and it's interesting when you look at that, you get taught core values in a company, and you get to see a big company from within. But because you're shadowing around about lots of different departments, you get a very good view of industry at a very early age. You're talking 16, 17. I was 16 when I started at Marconi. Oh, wow. So you're very young. I did my hires, so I turned 17 quite quickly after. But you're very young, and you get good exposure. And if you're lucky enough to find good mentors and good people within those organizations, then it projects your career. So yeah, so that was the start for me. So I got into the software industry, very early, and I stayed in it the whole time. Pretty much, tech. I was in tech the whole time. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so from Marconi?
Yeah, so I went from Marconi to the army, and then from the army I went to Microsoft. Well, actually, I didn't go to Microsoft actually straight away. I joined a small company. It's interesting when you leave the army, you think you've got a good CV, but you don't, and that you're not in civilian life. People don't care, and I just pulled out, and I wanted to go back into tech. And I went to a couple of recruitment companies, and they said that my CV was not relevant anymore, sort of thing. And so I just pulled out the yellow pages, and I phoned a load of small software companies, and I got a job. But from there I went very quickly into IBM, and then I got a good mentor in IBM, and then he took me to Microsoft. So I moved company quite quickly. It's just like, small company, IBM. Then I was only at IBM a very short time, and then I went straight into Microsoft. Yeah. And then I was at Microsoft for a total of kind of 18 years.
And was all this in the UK? Or
it was all in the UK to begin with, yeah.
And the tech, was it tech stuff in the army? Well, no, that was just...
Yeah, okay. I was going to, signals and stuff like that, right? So, okay. So it's tech. But yeah, I mean, the army, to me, the army was kind of like, it's just ancient history. You take some lessons from it, I think the key thing is one of the things, I think the key lesson I got, I think, was the difference between management and leadership's one word. A manager tries to make somebody do the best job they can. A leader tries to make them want to do the best job they can. And I think inspiration is more important than force. So I think, the ability to inspire is something that I think is really key. And if you look now, I'm a great believer in, when I think back, building high performing teams, and I'll jump forward and then we'll jump back again. If you're looking for it, because I was an apprentice, I've put an apprenticeship program together, and we've put 28 kids through university that mainly had no path to get there. And so far 18 have graduated, and they've had 14 first class honours and 4 2-1s, right? I mean, so, impressive. We've obviously inspired those kids to want to do the best they can. So I think that's a really important lesson.
Out of interest, how do they come to you then as apprentices? And what's the process?
So we've went through every model. So we've taken some kids from school, and we found that just a bit too hard. They're just a bit too young for us. Maybe young's not the right word, but just not ready. Do you know what I mean? They've just not had that. So now what we do is we work with the local colleges, and we take kids with HNDs. Kids, that's a bit derogatory, but you know, young adults, but yeah, I call them kids, right? In the office, I call them kids. They're like having an extended family. But, we take them with HNDs. So they've had 2 years full-time college, and that just kind of prepares them. And then it means that they can go straight into QA for us. So it means they can start working straight away pretty much. In QA, they can then learn, how to test code, and then they get a chance to see good code and bad code. And then once they've done a year of QA, then they go into development stream. So we've got a pretty good program. So we've had a couple of apprentices who have graduated the last couple of weeks, going into colleges around Scotland, talking about what we do and trying to go and find the next load coming through. So we've got some adverts just now for jobs, because we'll be hiring people in August. So we bring them in August, September time, and then they start. And the good thing about having an HND is you actually start university in third year. So you only go to university for 2 years. So if you think about 4 years at uni and work and all the other life experiences, it's just a long time. But 2 years, the 2 years flies for them really quickly. And they do kind of 3 trimesters. It's not 2 semesters. So they do a project in the summer relevant to their work. And 70% of their actual marks is actually attributed to the work that they do. So, by the time they finish, I don't want to talk about their salaries, right? But they get paid pretty well. They'll have earned over 50k over the 2 years. The students who are at university will have been probably gaining that level of debt. So they've got 2 years work experience, an HND, a degree. They've probably done a couple of kind of industry badges, like Microsoft certifications as part of their training. So they come out at the end probably the same age as people who have done a 4-year degree with no student loans, way more experience, way more qualifications, and are probably in a better place to start a career. So we're massive advocates of apprenticeships.
And very different to your experience of apprenticeship.
Oh, very different to our apprenticeship experience. But it's funny. When I speak to the guys, that I'm going golfing with a couple of the guys that I was an apprentice with next month. And one of them lives in Boulder, Colorado. So, we've all kept in touch, and a few of us, well, all of us, but most of us have kept in touch. And so we 40 years later, we're still in communication. Well, 39 if you want to be pedantic, but it was a long time ago. Yeah.
What does it really take to grow a business in Scotland today? This episode of Edinburgh Business Stories is brought to you by Henderson Loggie, chartered accountants and business advisors who help owner-managed businesses grow, from those first steps as an entrepreneur through to a happy retirement. Based right here in Scotland, Henderson Loggie knows what it takes to succeed locally. And through their membership of Prime Global, they help clients thrive internationally too. Their purpose? Helping their people, clients, and communities unlock their full potential, building legacies, creating wealth for local communities, and opening doors to future success. To learn more, get in touch with the Edinburgh team at Henderson Loggie today. So how do you end up in the monster of Microsoft? How does that come about?
I got lucky. I met somebody inside Microsoft, inside IBM that liked me, and I was in a conversation with them, and I was like, why don't you come here? And it was that simple. So I was asked to join, and I think that's an important lesson. I think about my career. I haven't written a CV or done an interview properly for a job since I joined IBM back in 94. So it's been 1994 since I've actually had a proper interview to apply for a job. Everything's been headhunted and asked to join since then. So I think a big, and I'm not bragging, or that's not being big-headed. It's about, just be pedantic and, make yourself useful, and I think what I think what's important in careers is to be a bit of a contrarian, but not to be a pain in the arse. So, don't be annoying inside a company, but be edgy and challenge, because what's the point of being surrounded by yes people? And if you look at the company I'm in now, I do town halls, and it's like, right, you can ask any question you like. And it's interesting when you see the apprentices are probably the ones that ask the questions that you probably don't want asked, because they're the bravest, because they know the culture so well that they know that, they can see what they're like, as long as they're not rude and they're respectful to other people, but they can ask anything they want because we're pretty transparent. So I think that's important in your career is, just always do your best. And I think I always used to look at people that were, a bit Machiavellian and very political, and they tended to kind of get promoted a little bit ahead quite quickly. But very quickly you realize that you can go fast alone, but you can't go far alone. And if you're not very good at kind of bringing high-performing teams together, then you don't tend to go very far in your career. So I think that's a really important thing is, be relevant and be good at teamwork and also look at the bigger picture. Cross-company collaboration is really, really important, and also just do things without being asked. I think at Microsoft, there was a guy called Jaidev Shergill who was he was the EVP, American, right? Titles are cheap in America, but he was the EVP of Citibank for innovation, so executive vice president. And we were in the Pig and Whistle in New York having a Guinness and some chicken wings, and we ended up talking about what we could do with their data. And we ended up pulling a couple of beer mats together, and we wrote and sketched out an idea for a company and using data to help people save better. And it was a bit like kind of TripAdvisor, but kind of through credit card spend. So if you ate in places a lot, then actually it was all right. And we ended up selling that company to a company called Bundle. We built a company together called Bundle that Microsoft put in money and Citi put in money. And we ended up selling that to Capital One for quite a lot of money, actually. And that was all in the back of, just kind of writing something down in the back of like 2 beer mats split in half and drawing it out. So I think that's a really important, so I've kind of rambled a bit, but, I got asked to join Microsoft by a really talented guy, actually, who died last year. And I was a bit, really sad. His name was Alistair Baker. So, Baker brought me into Microsoft. He was the country manager for Microsoft Scotland. And then he went on to do really well. He ended up running services worldwide for Microsoft. And then I ended up working in Seattle as well. So, careers are long things, right? So I think it's important to really look after, your network and your reputation in your career, because, it stays with you for a long time.
Mm-hmm. So tell us some stories from Microsoft days. Obviously, kind of Bill Gates and what have you got that you can share with us that's allowable on a podcast?
No. I mean, I thought he was amazing. I had several meetings with Bill when I was at Microsoft, and I think what was important was, he's just so smart. But I mean, one of the key pivotal meetings of my career, which actually led to us starting a company, was I was asked to facilitate a meeting with Unilever, which was the kind of marketing and IT department didn't really speak to each other. So we had a building called the EBC, which is the Executive Briefing Center, but, the place became a thing. So you have an EBC, it's an executive briefing. And so I put on an executive briefing, and going back to the point about being relevant and not being asked, our job was to sell software, like SQL and Exchange and, all the kind of traditional enterprise software for Microsoft. But I was really interested in the marketing side, the kind of the cool side. I was lucky enough to go to a couple of the kind of Microsoft parties down in Cannes at the Lions Festival, and the part of the company that made the least money actually had the most fun, so I wanted a slice of that action. So I started to get involved with the kind of advertising online piece of the business. And so what did an Xbox mean to Unilever? What did, kind of the fact that Microsoft touched 1.5 billion consumers every single day mean to a company like Unilever? So, so I got Bill to do a 2-hour session on the connected consumer. And we spoke about, how Microsoft engaged with consumers, what entities and products we had, and it changed. And it's interesting as well, because it, as an individual, you can actually make a lot of difference in a big organization. Microsoft kind of restructured the way it was thinking around about consumer enterprise, and actually built a whole new division. And actually Unilever changed quite significantly as well in the way it used digital and interacted. So, from one idea, from a meeting with a small group of people, 2 large organizations changed quite significantly on the back of that. So so we ended up doing a lot of business with Unilever on stuff we didn't sell, like in-game advertising. So, and also it's very targeted. So we ended up having to buy companies so we could put the actual, the kind of marketing collateral within the games. So we did a lot of work like that. And that led on to me putting together a big meeting with 89 product teams inside one company. And to do that in a company like Microsoft is very, very difficult. I got escalated a lot. People used to escalate on me quite a lot at Microsoft because I used to annoy people quite a bit. But
how did you do it though? Because to that point, it is difficult in a big corporate.
I just did it, right? And so I.
But did you have the kind of the seniority to pull them together, or you can't? Did you just say, "Look, I want you there, be there"? Or
well, I had relative seniority to do so, but I had the ear of the senior guys who ran the company. So I was able to convince the senior corporate vice presidents and presidents it was the right thing to do. So, and that was because of my network within the business. I put myself out. I knew lots of people. I was well connected inside the company. I had a reputation that people trusted me, and everyone was bought into the idea. So I did a lot of internal selling to make it happen, And so, I had, my boss was pretty senior inside the company, so he helped facilitate it. And then, and when you're in big organizations, you've got to think about, there's 2 sides, right? You've got your direct management route and you've got your exec sponsorship route. So you've got exec sponsors who sponsor you within the organization, and then you've got the kind of people that manage you. So, I leveraged, leverage is probably a bad word, but leverage sounds like you're kind of blackmailing them. But I didn't blackmail them, but I convinced them that it was the right thing to do for the good of the company. So I got senior sponsorship to make it happen, and actually, right to the very top of the company, CEO level of the business. So we were, and even then I was still getting escalated on. I mean, the CTO of Microsoft kept on complaining, saying this is my job. And, management was like, well, actually, this isn't your job. Your job is to kind of predict the future and think of the new stuff. The sales teams are actually working out better ways to sell it. So, we were taking what was already there and packaging it up in a way that was a lot better for us to sell, rather than actually trying to kind of create new products. So that's how we did it. It was through network and influence, rather than direct management responsibility.
And so what happened as a consequence of that, getting them together then? What was the output?
So we ended up doing significant business. We ended up putting together this initiative called Perfect Marketing. So we started bringing all the big companies in, showing them, the ability to create, deploy, analyze, optimize content globally at speed, at scale. We spoke about in-game advertising, targeting the consumer, bringing in data and analytics more extensively within and ultimately, I came up with the idea for a new product that I couldn't convince Microsoft to build, because, one of the things that's very hard to do inside organizations is make a product out of lots of different products, that all report up into different lines. So I kept on getting told that it wasn't core to Microsoft's business. So I was able to convince people in Accenture it was a good thing to do. So, the CEO of Accenture was a guy called Bill Green at the time. He was really interested in this area, so he wanted to do it. But then after a couple of years, he retired, and then the CEO changed, and then a new guy came in called Pierre Nonturn, and he wasn't as interested in. He viewed that they were more a services company than a software company, and actually they were more about actually using existing solutions within market and actually delivering them to clients rather than actually building it for themselves. So the whole initiative inside Accenture got shut down. So which is fine. I mean, I do great days at Accenture, right? The day I joined, the day I left. It's like buying a boat. The day you buy it, the day you sell it. But so I went back to Microsoft, and going back to the point about having a reputation, I was in Cannes, and I met with the senior leadership team at Microsoft, not not to kind of get a job or anything. I wasn't that bothered about getting a job at that point. I was happy just to take some time off. But, it was suggested to me to go back, and they gave me a job as the head of digital strategy for Europe for Microsoft. So, I went back in and we kind of picked up what we were doing before. And then I tried again to convince them to build it. But obviously, it wasn't core, right? It's not right for Microsoft, right? Because, Microsoft's a platform company, not a solution company as such.
And whilst all this is going on, so you obviously seen an opportunity, and was there frustration building in you that you could see it, but no one was kind of really latching on?
It's weird. I didn't really get frustrated because there's no point in getting frustrated about things you can't control, right? What's interesting, one of the hardest things to do in business is to jump the S curve, right? So companies that are successful in one generation of business are never, right? So a simple example that Guy Kawasaki always uses is that, in the kind of late 1800s, early 1900s, all the companies, all the houses of New York used to refrigerate their houses by bringing massive, massive chunks of ice from the lakes in North New York and bringing them into the cellars, and they took 3-4 months to melt, and that kept the cellars cold, and that's where they kept their food, right? Mm-hmm. So they were in refrigeration, right? But when the advent of electricity came along, not one single one of those ice cutting companies became a refrigeration company, right? Because they didn't make electricity products. Yeah. But so that whole industry got decimated, right? So they couldn't jump the S curve of the way of refrigerating today is not the way to refrigerate tomorrow, right? So that's one of the hardest things to do in business so I could see, so this was just in the early days of Azure and the cloud. So I could see what was coming with Microsoft Cloud, but I could see that the incumbents weren't leveraging the cloud properly because they would have to rebuild everything again. And when you're PE backed and VC backed, then it's very difficult to go to the board and say, right, I need another 200 million to rebuild our whole product set, right? So I could see that wasn't happening because a lot of people would have went, why would you go into a marketplace where that's already heavily funded and there's actually lots of well-established businesses? And so I took the decision that I want to build a headless, before headless was invented, cloud first solution. And I've still got the piece of paper that, says that this has got to be cloud, multi-tenanted, it's got to be quick, it's got to be fast, easy to localize, very secure, accessible, and centralized data, right? So I've still got the piece of paper. It's a one-pager. That was the kind of high-level story for our product. And if you think about, building products, and everyone thinks, software, it's all about kind of people sitting with hoodies all night coding, right? That's not the industry, right? There's 5 stages of building a software product, which is product definition, which is kind of that one pager, but then we wrote a 50 pager on it. But product architecture, so there's the what and the how. Then there's build and test, then there's pre-production, then there's service delivery, service management, and going back to the point about kind of building teams and high-performing teams. And it's also, we should talk about girls in STEM actually a little bit on this one because, I've got quite strong views on this because if you think about that process, the actual software bit's very small, so more girls need to go into STEM and into software because if you look at our business, all the business analysts, all the project managers, all the, there's a lot of leaders, the person who's responsible for delivery, for the projects, etc. All girls, right? All girls, right? So when it comes to STEM, just because girls don't necessarily want to do software and write code, and I'll probably get shot for saying this, but girls just don't want to do software and code. We can't get the CVs, we can't get people to come in. I've given up trying. So what we do now is we focus more on the kind of softer, more strategic areas of communication and project management, program management, project delivery, scrum leads, all for girls. But so going back, I kind of jumped away there, but going back, I didn't get frustrated, but I was actually really pleased that I could see a gap in the market, and we've come in and done it. And
to the lay person, if you could describe what the business delivers now, go and just help us
it's dead simple, right? So we've built a very scalable, secure platform for building and deploying websites across any device, in any language, anywhere in the world. And that's it, right? And then once it's built, then the ability to edit it Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that, right? Because there's a lot of security, and then there's all the workflows, etc., built in for approvals so that they're compliant. But it's a very secure, compliant web platform for building and running websites.
Yeah.
And so that's in comparison to like a WordPress.
Absolutely.
Right. So it's like people build on WordPress, people build on Wix, people build on Forrit.
Yeah.
But not normal people.
Yeah, but it's they're doing the same thing.
Yes.
Right. But that's like saying a 2CV is a car, and so is a Rolls Royce is a car.
Yeah.
Right. They're both cars, and they can both get 4 people in them, but they're very different.
But it's the core of the thing.
It's the core of the thing is we're like a WordPress. Yeah. But we are very, very scalable, secure, and also, but we're also not like a WordPress in that, everyone goes on about SaaS, like software as a service, right? But we're more of a platform as a service solution. So we don't just do changes that impact a client. We deliver a platform as a service so that we integrate into the security protocols and the security requirements of clients. So it's more of a collaborative with the client tool rather than just giving you a service.
And Peter, you've got, I don't know if you can or can't say that, but you've got some big customers that you're supporting.
Yep.
And obviously that's presumably the competence in terms of enterprise sales kind of from Microsoft, obviously now is kind of what you're really deploying for Forrit as well, right?
Yep.
But you also kind of mentioned that earlier off camera, the idea of you need to get this right for your customers.
Yep.
And you're a fast-paced guy, but you had to slow things down. So can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, so we, a lot of people in tech talk about fake it until you can make it, right? Which, fine, that's okay if you're building apps or things that don't matter, and if they don't work, then who cares, right? If somebody can't get access to a game, it doesn't really matter, right? It's like, it doesn't matter, right? But when you're building when you're running enterprise software solutions, you've got to get it right. Right, it can't go down. It's got to be available 24/7. It just can't go down, and people can't hack it. It's got to be secure. And it's interesting. We thought we were ready to really scale our business about 4 years ago, and we got the first lot of clients live. And so we'd never really spoken to the content editors, right? The people at the end of the chain, the people that just use it day to day. We'd always spoken to the people that built the websites, who looked after the infrastructure, who looked after security. And once we got the platform to them, everyone thought it was rubbish. They thought it was too hard to use, because they were used to WordPress, right? So we designed it as a kind of more enterprise, software solution, where we assumed wrongly that the people using it were software engineers and software or HTML competent, users. And actually they were content editors who just cared about content and who didn't understand code or tech. And so we got this feedback from everybody. And so there's 2 things you could do, and you can approach this 2 ways. One, you could just go, you're all wrong and you should be better skilled, right? Which is, which is wrong, because why get skilled in something that's not your job, right? Yeah. Or you do what we did, which is listen. So because we didn't have private equity and we didn't have VCs behind us, we'd pretty much self-funded through ourselves and an angel. Up to this point, which is really, really unusual actually, because all the other people we are competing against have raised, 200-300 million, and we've raised a total of 7, which is pennies compared to everyone else. I've actually raised 9 now, but even then it's pennies. So we put a halt on selling. Absolutely, we stopped selling. We said, right, we're not getting any new clients until we fix this.
And just on that, how far into Forrit are you at the point at which you learn this?
Well, really, that would have been about 21, 22. So 4 or 5 years in.
Right. Okay. Gosh.
Yeah, because we'd run everyone's systems up to that point. So we'd been able to fund our company by having a services company, supporting clients, and we do all the builds and running for them until we got it ready to give to the clients to run themselves. Because the only way you can scale a business, like a software business, is for people to be self-service. So our engineers found it really easy to use, and our software teams and delivery teams, it was a piece of cake because they were all software guys. Once it got to content editors, they found it too hard. So we wouldn't be able to scale our business. We'd have went bust, and we wouldn't be able to scale a business if we hadn't listened to the clients and just said, right, let's stop selling. We've got clients, we've got the money coming in, we can keep them happy by doing a white glove service. We put service wrappers around them all. We helped, so the stuff that they couldn't do around about the coding and stuff like that to get the components and things built, we did all that stuff for multiple years while we brought in a third-party company, actually also in Edinburgh. So we brought in Nile HQ, who's owned by Sarah Ronald. So Sarah's company came in and helped us. So we did about 25 user roundtables with the clients, telling us what they actually needed, and we listened to them, and we kept the clients we had happy while we fixed it, and then we've got it fixed and ready to go. So yeah, so it's probably the smartest thing we've ever done. But it was also one of the bravest, and every single, all my friends were like, "You're an idiot! Don't do that. You can keep on scaling." Da, da, da. But one of the things you've got to be careful not to do is to build too much technical debt into your customer base, because you just bust your business trying to fix it retrospectively. So we took that decision.
And so now you're ready
we're
to
in
really
full sales. Yeah, we're in full sales mode now. We're really starting to move. Yeah.
And I guess I'm assuming therefore that's really where a large chunk of your competence lies, in sales and kind of just getting the clients on board.
Yeah, I've got somebody running sales.
Yeah.
So he's also kind of real kind of sales machine. So we've got him in. And so we're building a sales function out now. I mean, sales functions are really expensive, right? So we're being very conservative and careful not to just go and build a massive organization too quickly. But the deals we do are pretty big, right? The deals we do tend to be a minimum of $500,000 a year. So you don't have to do lots and lots of them. We've got a couple in the pipeline that are several million a year. So once they come in, then we'll be able to, we've just got a really big hit in marketing CMO to join our board. She was the CMO of one of the top companies in the world. We can't announce it just now. It's just going to be announced in the next few days. Right. But we've not finalized all the paperwork, but we've got the agreement. So, she's based in New York. She was the CMO of a company that grew from 250,000 people to kind of 700,000 people while she was the CMO. So it's, they're all pretty big hitters we have on our board. 2 CVPs from Microsoft and a CMO of one of the biggest companies in the world. So we're just pivoting now the business. So we're going to move into the States as quickly as we can afford to, which will be within the next 12 months to really start to kind of build a sales operation in New York or on the East Coast of America.
All right.
So we're now pivoting. So we've got a pretty good pipeline just now. We'll land everything through this year. We'll get ourselves to December, and then we'll go on to the next wave of growth.
Brilliant. And what's the ambition? Kind of, what's the long term? What can you see for Forrit?
See, it's this is weird, and I've never really been that ambitious, to be honest. And that I've never kind of set targets for things, even when I was at Microsoft, because I don't think I'd ever set targets in the way that what I've been able to kind of do. I would never have said I want to do this or I want to get to that level, or I would never have had the imagination, because I didn't know that the world I ended up in even existed when I started my career. So I've always just tried to do the best thing we can, right? So, companies like ours are very, very valuable, big multipliers on the annual recurring revenue. If you've got big clients with long contracts. So my view is just do our best, and whatever happens will happen. Because I think if you say, right, I want to exit, then you just start to drive the wrong behavior. I think companies like ours, they're not sold, they're bought. So, what I think the right thing to do is just to make it a really good company, make it amazing, and then and have a good culture. And I think what's important in business is, you've got to build a good culture to build a good company, to build a good product, to build a good business, and I think that's the way it goes, right? You can't have a good business, well, you can, but very few people do, but you can't have a good business without having a good company, right? And you can't have a good business without having a good product. And I think, but you can't have either of that if you don't build a good culture. So we've got a really nice company where I think it's pretty respectful and people kind of care about each other. And then from that, we've been able to then go and build the product and really get going.
And what's your angle then to building the culture? What are some of the big things that you've done or you feel are important?
I think just be yourself, right? You know, I think Oscar Wilde, I think, said that, you know, always be yourself because everyone else is taken. I think have an open door policy. You know, I kind of go for lunch a lot with the staff, you know, just like grab them and say, right, come on, tell me what's going on. I think take an interest in people's life. I think if you help, you know, one of our staff has just been very, very ill. She's been off sick for 8 months now. She's been very ill, and we've supported her, and, you know, we've maintained her lifestyle all the way through. She's come back to work now kind of on a part-time basis, just while she recovers, because she was, you know, very ill. And so I think when people see that, and we don't do that because we feel it's the right thing to do. We feel that because we actually genuinely care, you know? Yeah. So I think that, you know, I think people know, I think the leadership team need to care. You know, I think you should worry about nothing, care about everything. And if you do that, then I think people feel safe. And I think when people feel safe, then they can do their best work, you know, and I think that's important. You know, because it's about creating a nest. You know, we've done we've helped 4 other startups grow. I don't know if you know this. We've helped 4 other startups go. So we've taken, we took 2 big ears into our offices for the first 3 or 4 years. When they left university, they sold to Facebook. We took Almighty. They went to PE. We took Player Data, they're worth about 50 million now. So we had them from university, 2 kids. We had them in our offices for about 3 years. And then we helped Infix. So between all of them, you know, we've been the foundation and provided the initial nest for over 150 jobs out of Edinburgh, all to be started, all from our office, you know. And not because I was asked me to do it. We've taken small stakes in the companies and stuff, but you know, I think that's important, is to create an environment to succeed, and I think that's really, really important, you know. But you know, I think we try to be a kind company, but I don't think anyone in our company would ever now mistaken kindness for weakness. You know, because we're not weak as individuals, and so we will make harsh decisions very quickly if need to be taken. But we will always be fair, and I think that's important. So,
and Peter, you mentioned previously about a boss that hated you.
Yeah, oh God, yeah.
Can you maybe expand on that and maybe say, how does that inform how you then go about leading your team?
I've never experienced anything like this in my life, right? The guy was a complete psycho, and I've never been bullied before in my life. I've literally never been bullied before in my life, and this guy was trying to bully me, and I'm like, you're not going to bully me, you know? It's like, you know, I'd been at Microsoft maybe 10 years at this point, and he'd been there 7 months. And all I got all the time was, Microsoft's brought me in from Oracle because everyone here's rubbish and I need to, you know, you can't do it. And I'm like, that's really weird, because we're probably the most successful company in the world ever, and you came from a pretty shitty company compared to us. So we must have done something okay. I just took him on, you know, and I just took him on. And he did everything he could to get me fired. You know, I ended up on a written warning because of him. And, you know, but I think companies with integrity, and I think Microsoft does have a lot of integrity internally, you know, they eventually realize what's going on. It was difficult because he was so senior and his boss was in the States, so he didn't have a lot of people managing him. There was lots of people off sick with stress because of him. And eventually he was exited out of the business. But I think, yeah, and I think when you get into a situation like this, if you feel, you know, good employees don't become bad employees overnight, you know, and so, you know, a lot of people turned into bad employees that were working for him because and a lot of people left that were good and talented. But yeah, and it's interesting. So I think it's important, right? If somebody's bullying you at work, take them on, right? And go to and I ended up in HR. You know, it was like every one-to-one we had, and I never went to HR. He went to HR, right? about me. And I was like, well, got you share about me, I'll tell you exactly what, So our one-to-ones HR were in the meeting rooms, and the guy was massive. He was like, I'm 6'4" and he was 6'8", big bodybuilder guy. And he was like screaming and shouting all the time. And I'd be like, I really think you should just keep quiet. I'm your manager. I'm your manager. Shout, I'm your manager. And I'm like, well, actually, I work for Microsoft. I don't work for you. I work for the company. You're just a line manager, while the company lets you be. So I think what's important is if you get absolutely bullied by a company, and he was bullying a lot of people. It wasn't just me, it was several people. I think go to the company and actually use the process to get it fixed. And if the company doesn't fix it, then why would you want to be part of that company anyway, right? Because if they're supporting that kind of behavior, then actually, and Microsoft didn't support that behavior. But yeah, it's interesting because I've never really had stress I've never been stressed as a person. And I actually, for the first time in my career, I actually felt under a burden of stress. And I felt, it's interesting, it's like you go into a tailspin. And if you don't stop it quickly, it gets faster and faster, and you get closer to the ground, and you've got to pull yourself out. And I actually pulled myself out of it quite quickly, a lot quicker than the other people did. And then I took him on but he would be phoning me at like 10 o'clock at night on a Sunday night going, I need this report done by 12. Well, what are you going to do with it at 12 o'clock? I'll do it tomorrow. I'm telling you as your manager, I want it done. I'm like, I'm not doing it. It's like that simple.
Yeah.
But so if you ever get bullied by anybody, within an organization, you've got to take them on. And don't, because it just gets worse, right? And if there was ever a time in the history of the world, people need to realize bullies only stop when they're stopped, right? Then bullies are only stopped when they're stopped. Bullies will keep on going until, as long as you let them do it. So I think that's an important lesson.
Yeah, very good.
Peter, we ask all our guests, what is your guiding principle in business?
I think it's don't hire arseholes. It's true, right? It's like all you need is one horrible person in an office to spoil the whole office. Somebody who's Machiavellian, right? Hire well, hire good people, hire people that want to do well. Hire, I think it's all about. I think the guiding thing is build high performing teams. Begin with the end in mind. We used to get Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Successful People thrust down our throat. I can't remember the other 6, but the one that stuck with me is always begin with the end in mind, right? Kind of articulate where you want to end up. I know that kind of contradicts what I've said about what the aspiration is for the company, but for a project or building something, begin with the end in mind. I think always do your best, is real, try your hardest. And I think just to be fair, so be fair, build high performing teams, and be thoughtful. And I think one of the things I learned at Microsoft is the power of the crowd is always better than the power of the individual, right? The power of collective thought is always going to be better than one genius who disrupts everybody else. So I think it's the cohesion of high performing teams. And I think something that's really important that people don't put enough effort into is know thyself, right? Know who you are. We used to get strength finders at Microsoft all the time. And so, I know myself really well. I know what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And I think be honest with yourself about what you're not good at and actually put teams around about you that actually compensate for that. I know that I'm not a detailed person, right? So I have detailed people around about me. I know I'm a strategic thinker. I know ideation. I know, kind of a maximizer. I know I'm good at getting kind of good things out of teams, right? So I know I'm good at that. I know what I'm not good at. And I think it's be honest with yourself about that. So yeah, that's what I'd probably say.
Peter, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your story, and we're excited to see where Forrit goes in the future.
Thanks for your time. Thank you.